During the period immediately after the 1966 election, there was a lot of talk about forming a third party on the grounds that the Democrats were denying any money and thus any nominations to people who opposed the Vietnam War.
I was a student at Long Beach State, so I took the bus to San Francisco. And to my amazement, I found like 100,000 people marching in the streets against the war in Vietnam. The organization that organized the march was Community for New Politics. And so I got involved with Community for New Politics in Long Beach, California. They were pushing the idea of a third ticket in California. I say third ticket because they didn't really want to create a third party. They wanted a third ticket because they just wanted to scare the hell out of the Democrats and then continue being Democrats.
A third ticket would mean that you get a certain number of signatures on a petition to put a candidate on the ballot. A third party would mean that you form a new party and get enough registrants to get on the ballot.
The way for a third ticket to get on was to circulate a petition and get about 670,000 signatures, which means you have to gather 1 million signatures. It also meant that the people that were going that route, not only were they doomed to failure, but they were also dooming the idea of even getting a party on the ballot.
And this appeared to many to be impossible. We're not the first ones to think of it. There had been third parties on the California ballot before, but the idea that it couldn't be done kind of fell before the big mass of opposition to the Vietnam War and the wave of support for the civil rights movement, for the movement against racism. So in early 1967, some of us decided that we were going to be participating in anti-war demonstrations anywhere we could go to them.
President Johnson was having a fundraising dinner in Century City in Los Angeles, and 10,000 people turned out to protest his dinner, mainly white, middle-class Americans, children, women.
I went with a fair-sized group of people, including a couple of my brothers. I encouraged a couple of people I knew from LA to come on over to the registrar's table, where for the very first time, people were being registered into the Peace and Freedom Party.
This is the first day that we know that people have actually registered into Peace and Freedom Party. And so because they registered in the Peace and Freedom Party, we call that our birthday.
So a couple people who were willing to register Peace and Freedom Party, I took them over to the registrar. Others were doing it too. I don't know how many were registered that day. The event was cut short when the police, for no obvious subjective reason, decided that they were going to have a riot and beat everybody up.
And for some reason or another, the police declared it an unlawful assembly, and somewhere along the line they charged into the crowd. So we call June 23rd our birthday. In 2017 is our 50th birthday. However, it wasn't until George Wallace, governor of Alabama, former governor, a segregationist, when he announced that the American Independent Party had qualified for the ballot in California, and that he would be on the ballot as their candidate, that suddenly an anarchist uprising sprang forward, and people started running around to the California Democratic clubs, CDCs, and going in and saying, if the right-wingers can have a party, the left-wingers can have a party. Just register Peace and Freedom Party long enough to get us on the ballot. Then you can go back in February or March and re-register in the Democratic Party and vote for Eugene McCarthy.
At first, I registered Peace and Freedom at a New Year's Eve party in 1967, but that was mainly to get it on the ballot. I was already active as a Democrat, and we had a local candidate.
And so there was a massive registration drive, and in January of 1968, we had actually qualified for the ballot, along with the American Independent Party. Peace and Freedom Party registered 105,100 members into the party. And so our founding convention was in March of '68, and that was in Richmond, California.
The Peace and Freedom Party ran Eldridge Cleaver for president, and he was one of the Minister of Information of the Black Panther Party. And he didn't run in all states, but the Peace and Freedom Party ran in other states besides California in that year. And some states he ran, and some states he didn't run. But in any case, and then Bobby Seale was a candidate. He's the chairman of the Black Panther Party, was a candidate for the Peace and Freedom Party. And Kathleen Cleaver, who was Eldridge's wife, she was the communications secretary for the party. So this way we were able to merge the demands of the Peace and Freedom Party, which was not only black liberation, but also get out of Vietnam. And those are also part of the Black Panther Party's 10-point program. So it was, I think, a very, I guess today we'd call that fighting for socialist unity between two different parties with different constituencies.
There was still a lot of feeling and camaraderie between Black Panthers and Peace and Freedom Party. So in that sense, it was a very positive movement.
Sometime in the late 60s, there was a Peace and Freedom office. It seemed like they kept getting offices and buildings that were about to be torn down so they would get free or almost free rent. And this was a building like that, and there was something called the Peace and Freedom Movement along with the Peace and Freedom Party. And this was a conscious decision by the people.
Then in 1974, Peace and Freedom Party declared itself a feminist and a socialist party. Feminism over the years has emerged, women's rights have come forward, and the women's movement is stronger today than it has been a long time.
I got very much involved in '74 in our becoming socialist and feminist. And when that vote took place, all the libertarians walked out of the convention. And from then on, I got involved. In 1980, I ended up being the presidential candidate. I mean, Peace and Freedom Party was in the forefront of all kinds of things. The only party with, pro-gay, lesbian platform, pushing the 18-year-old vote.
In some ways, some of the things that Peace and Freedom Party has advocated and worked for have actually become realities. One of our first acts was to launch a registration drive in the late 60s for the 18-year-old vote. That failed, but it became so popular that the 18-year-old vote soon became the law of the land.
Peace and Freedom Party was involved in helping put the very first anti-war initiative on the ballot. San Jose was the first city to have an anti-Vietnam War on the ballot, which was voted for by the people there.
Well, I think it's important to have an alternative to the Democratic and Republican Party because they're both parties of war. They're both parties that are pushing for war. And they're also both parties that in their actions, if not always in their rhetoric, in their actions, they're for preserving a system of racial oppression and national oppression.
Election time is different. People will pay attention, they'll listen. A lot of people will give a fair hearing to people that they wouldn't normally listen to at all because they take seriously their need to select a candidate to vote for. Now, in some states, it's Republican or Democrat, or you're an independent who gets to pick which Democrat or Republican you vote for. In California, we have a long tradition that I and thousands of other people helped establish back in 1968. Californians now have a long tradition, a 50-year tradition of being able to pick from people of various points of view.